welcome to Beth and Missy Talk.
I'm so excited that we finally got our show started.
So am I. We have exciting topics each probably week to bring you. Today we are going to be talking about what is a sexual offense. And just the basics, I would say today we're going to bring you.
Right. I think just kind of an overview. We'll go more in depth in all of the areas, but I think really just kind of educating people a little bit more on what is actually sexual abuse, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there.
I agree. So Missy, from a clinical perspective, what is a sex offense? When someone comes to your office and comes to see you, I mean, they're probably either on probation or have come out of prison and they've been found guilty of a sex crime. What are some of the things you talk about with them?
Absolutely. So let's start with the question of what a sexual offense is. There's all kinds out there, but really what it comes down to is when a person engages in some type of sexual behavior without either the explicit consent of someone or with someone who is not capable of giving consent. That could be someone who is underage. That could be someone who is under the influence of some kind of substance, or someone who has some sort of cognitive impairment.
Right. So when people come to see you and you're treating them, can you talk about what is coercion? Because I know that comes up a lot.
Absolutely. And I think that's probably one of the situations that both causes trauma and is often misrepresented in the court setting. So coercion is when a person has shown that they do not want to engage in a sexual behavior with someone. However, the offender will manipulate that person into presenting as giving consent.
No, that makes sense. And I would imagine there's a difference between coercion and force. Can you talk to us about that?
Absolutely. And force also comes in a lot of different manners. Force is when a person either physically, medically, or mechanically restrains someone and forces sexual behavior onto someone. Coercion is when a person will manipulate a person in engaging in the sexual behavior. This could be asking over and over again, giving ultimatums, promising certain behaviors or services to the person if they engage in that sexual behavior.
So, Missy, how do you talk to someone, or what are your thoughts on when a grown male, for example, might offend against a young child? What category might you put that in?
That is going to be not capable. A child is not capable of giving consent, because part of that is truly understanding the behavior that the child is engaging in, right? And children they're not really prepared for that long term. Even if a child understands, has some understanding of sex and sexual behaviors, a child has a very difficult time really comprehending long-term effects of those behaviors.
Right, and I think, what are your thoughts on, so let's talk about maybe teenagers-ish, right? And so 18-year-olds. Can you maybe talk again from a clinical perspective, what are same-age peers? What is that age range? I think we both get a lot of questions like that from community members and clients. What would you say that is, age difference-wise?
Sure. So from a clinical point of view, a same-age interaction, we kind of look at less than a 2-year age difference,
Okay.
right? And we usually look at right around the age of 14. 14 is still pretty young, but 14, 15, if there's a 2-year, no more than a 2-year period, the person was not coerced or forced. Clinically, that's not really going to fit into that sexual offense.
Sure, that makes sense. But you have high schoolers, right? With you have seniors and you have freshmen, right?
Right.
If you're maybe a parent who, I guess, what advice might you provide, or what's your opinion or thought? I know I'm putting you on the spot, but if your senior son or child wants to date a freshman, what advice would you say? Is it maturity-wise, brain development? They're just at different probably periods of time, even though they're both in high school, would you say?
Absolutely, and that's a really good point, because it's not really outside of the norm for a senior to date a freshman, right? But you really do have to look at that developmental stage. We develop so fast from the time we're born to the age of 25. Right? And so if you have a 17-year-old engaging in a relationship with a 14-year-old, there's some significant developmental differences, which results in an imbalance of power. And that's really what it comes down to.
Sure.
Right?
Sure. So getting back to, I guess, what is a sex offense? How do you determine, Missy, who might need treatment versus who doesn't?
Oh my goodness, that's a big question. We'll have to have multiple.
True. Yes.
Right. So for me, when I was referred someone who had been convicted of a sexual offense, they would come in and I would get all kinds of information, right? So there's all kinds of testing. There's MSIs, there's polygraphs, there's ABLs, there's, in certain situations I may ask for a PCLR. And then also police reports, the PSI, and so we kind of take all of that information as well as a clinical interview, and we look at risk factors. I forgot the SO-TIPS. I love the SO-TIPS. It is fabulous. We look at different risk factors. We look at the different dynamics of the offense. Oh, now I'm remembering, like the static and the frost and all of those things. And then we typically go back to the research that's done. In treatment, we typically determine if a person is minimum risk, medium risk, or high risk, and then there's those gray areas. And depending on the risk level that they're in, really determine what our approach to treatment was going to be.
Right, yeah. And you're right, we will do an entire probably topic and segment on each of those things.
Absolutely.
What goes into to assessing each person, because each person is unique, and as is their case. To probably wrap up this segment today, what would you say would be, I know mine, I would say the majority of people that I worked with on probation were, crimes against children, would probably be 60 or so percent, sexual assaults, and then you have the voyeurism and the exhibitionism, bestiality, some of those cases, exposing.
A lot of online offenses. That was becoming more and more common.
Excuse me.
Over the last few years, which we can do multiple segments, and we'll do multiple segments on online offending, because parents, I implore you, right? Let's be healthy with our kids online.
Yes, I agree. Is there anything else you think that we should cover before we wrap up basics of sex offenses?
No, I think we should probably, in our next segment, we'll go over to hands-on, hands-off, and those kinds of things.
Yes.
So
thank you for joining us today for Beth and Missy Talk.